Welcome to The Ripple, where extraordinary women executives get real about their career journeys. This season, thanks to our partnership with GNW Consulting, you'll hear even more stories from women leaders about how they're building visibility for themselves, their careers, and their companies.
I'm your host, Ashley Loves, and today we're joined by the grounded Tash Durkins. She's the author of Fiercely Joyful, 11 Keys to Living Authentically and Creating a Life You Love. And she's also the founder of Fiercely Joyful Executive Coaching. She's here to talk about being in community through vulnerable visibility. Tash, I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I think this is going to be a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to learning more about you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Ashley. I'm so excited to be here today.
I know you wrote this fantastic book, Fiercely Joyful. I want to hear about that and what it's meant for you to write a book as part of your own journey to be more visible and develop your personal brand.
It's really funny because when I wrote the book, I've been planning this for like 10 years, but couldn't get it done. I later learned I had to write in community. I couldn't write by myself. But I'd been talking about it, and the only reason I really wanted to write the book, Ashley, was because both my parents passed away when I was fairly young, 20 when my mom died and 29 when my dad died. And getting through the grief of it, what helped me was remembering the amazing lessons they taught me and feeling like even though I missed my parents so much, that I had such a solid foundation that I could still make it. Like I wasn't going to just, lose life and not be able to sustain and be successful, that I was going to make it. And over time, the more I leaned on those lessons, I felt like I need to share these. I want other people to know. So that was the whole reason for writing the book, right? And my program, I went to a hybrid publishing program. I remember the first conversation with the publisher, and he was like, okay, well, what's the book about? And I start telling him basically what I just told you. He's like, no. What is the plan after the book is published? What are you going to do? Like, what is this going to be the catapult for? I was like, huh? That's not what this is about. I just want some lessons. What are you talking about? He's like, no. That's not how this works. Like, do you want to become a speaker? Do you want to, do coaching? He's like, I heard you've been, I was like, well, I am a coach, but I didn't think about that. And that was the first time, that conversation with him where he's like, listen, this is why I do this, because he specializes in helping marginalized voices write books, become authors. And he was like, this is why I do this. This is an opportunity for you to be out in the world and heard. And I was always comfortable with that kind of in my own sphere, but never thought about it beyond that. And honestly, though, it didn't make me uncomfortable. It was just something I never considered for myself. So once he opened that aperture for me, I was like, maybe more of the world needs to know about joy. And I didn't figure out how to do it.
So was this before or after you started your coaching practice?
I officially started my coaching practice after I started writing. I'd been coaching for years at work, and I was, officially a coach in that capacity, but hadn't started my own thing. So it was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go ahead and do that and figure out what that looks like. And I'll just tell you, I never expected my coaching practice to become a full-time thing. It since has. That this is now what I get to do in the world. And I'm incredibly grateful.
How much of that do you think is because of the work that you've done with your book? I know that you're also on LinkedIn and you're speaking. How much has your work to create visibility created the business that you have now?
Well, honestly, I think it's huge. Honestly, Ashley. Because even though I wouldn't have called it visibility back then, 10 years ago in my job as a federal government executive, I started this little circle of women because I insisted everybody do a self-assessment at the halfway point of the year. The self-assessments were horrible.
Really?
Horrible in that they weren't taking credit for half of what they did. And I was like, no, this is not how we're going to do this. got everybody together. I went to my boss because he had a bigger budget. And I said, could you buy this book for my little group, which was Show Your Work?
Oh,
And we
yeah.
bought the book for everybody and started working on essentially being visible and comfortable about being visible, actually owning what we're accomplishing. So back then, it was so important to me because I just felt like, with this self-assessment, you're going to get a fully successful. But that's not actually how you showed up. You're just simply not taking credit for it. So I just relished that opportunity. And to this day, people tell me that it made such a difference for them in being able to speak more comfortably about their own accomplishments.
Why do you think that people don't take credit for their work?
We're raised to be humble, women in particular. We are raised to be humble, sometimes to the point, I would say, of invisibility. You're not to be seen. You're supposed to just get things done quietly. And that's how we were raised. And it was frankly no different for me. But my parents were adamant about one thing, which was to be proud of what I was accomplishing. To be proud and to own it and basically not dim my light. It wasn't about visibility per se, but not surrendering essentially ownership of the things that I did to others. No, I just, and you go through that process, and I went through this with the little community at work where we weren't allowed to dismiss our accomplishments when somebody praised us. And it was really hard. But that, oh my God, Ashley, you did amazing. Oh, well, it wasn't no big deal. That wasn't allowed. If nothing else, it had to just be thank you.
Yeah.
It just had to be thank you. And then eventually it became, well, thank you. I did feel really excited when I submitted that. I felt really good just about how much effort I put into it. And so it's this lifelong sort of habit that becomes really hard to break, I think.
It's one thing to take credit for your work that you did, and you did a lot of work to create this book.
Mm-hmm.
And then your book is out in the world, and suddenly it's not just taking credit for what you did, it's promoting what you did. Did that feel different to you? Did that kind of push some boundaries for you?
It did a little bit. Because I remember my publisher saying, before the book was even published, it was, at the printer. And he said, look, you're going to need to start looking at what book awards you should submit for. It's like, I'm not a writer. I just wrote a book, but I'm not a writer. So I don't, that felt uncomfortable for me because I was positioned for what felt like taking credit of a skill, so to speak, that I didn't have. And I had to talk myself down from that because my husband was like, first of all, you actually can write. I mean, you're not a writer by trade, but you can write. The point here is for people to hear the stories. You wanted people to hear the lessons. I said, yes. He said, well, they don't hear them if you don't promote. Don't promote the book. It's pretty simple. I was like, well, yeah, good point. And when I started learning that I wasn't selling the book, I was sharing the opportunities that I got out of life from those lessons that my parents taught me. I really was. That's what I wanted people to have. And actually, I'll tell you, there was this one, I was at a conference in my previous position, and I'm just walking through the conference halls, and someone comes down the hall. And she's like, oh my God, it's you. And I'm looking around thinking, who
Who are you talking about?
I want to know who's here. She's like, no, you, when she's pointing at me. I was like, how do you know me? Have we met? But she's like, no, but I read your book twice and I follow you on LinkedIn. I couldn't believe it. And that was uncomfortable. That was uncomfortable because that's when it finally hit that, oh, this whole promoting thing means people are paying attention.
It's working.
It's working. People are paying attention. And then the problem came from the idea of, well, am I making the right impact? Is
You
she
felt
getting,
responsibility.
yes, I felt responsibility. Is she getting what I'm intending for her to get out of this? Eventually, I learned to surrender that because everybody's meant to get what they're meant to get. I don't control that. My job
Yeah.
is to show up and tell the story.
That's one of the hardest parts about putting yourself out there. And I think a lot about this with writing. I think about this as a performer. And, I have a lot of friends who are artists. And anytime you put something out into the world, it's no longer just yours. And it's no longer just your intention, right?
Yeah.
People get to receive it however they receive it. And that's what's so hard because we can't control it.
But I still believe strongly. It didn't take me long to get over it because, and I remember this was kind of a lesson from my mom, but I believe strongly that the experiences we live are also part of the story we're meant to tell because it's to help, support, comfort, whatever it is, others. It's not just solely ours. I do believe it is meant to be shared in community, whatever that looks like for you. And so when I stopped to think about that, because that feels like a big responsibility, and I embrace it very seriously. Some people would say I'm crazy, but I do. I feel like it's my job to share my experiences so others can learn or grow or choose differently if they want, right? And so once that kind of resonated in my mind after some reflection, and I just let go of the desire to try to control the message. Like, can I tell you one quick story, Ashley?
Oh, please.
Comes to mind. So the first chapter of my book is a biographical one where I tell the whole ugly truth of some things that were traumatic in my life. And my publisher and editor were like, doesn't feel like this is a joyful chapter.
This is a rough
You
start.
might want to leave this out, Tash. I was like, yeah, no, not leaving out. And I mean, they were really concerned that nobody would buy the book. But I was adamant because I knew somebody would be helped. I didn't know who. If it was one person, that was fine, but somebody would be helped by that chapter. So I insisted it's in there. The main reason I wanted to do that was because I want people to see you can come through trauma and choose joy on the other side. That was really the crux of it. But can I just say, countless women have come to me and said, you were telling my story in that chapter. I get chills thinking about it. You were telling my story, Tash, and I've never told a soul that I went through those things. But I felt so seen reading that, like I was no longer alone. Can you believe? I was so glad I found my instinct that it had to be there. I left it in there. And that's just the women I've talked to. There may be others, right? But that made it worth it. So me telling my story, being all vulnerable and telling the ugly messiness of life was well worth it.
I think that you telling the darker parts of your story, the more full reality of it, because so many people feel seen by that, they feel seen in your struggle, it makes it a lot easier to accept the joy and to accept the advice, right? Because if it's all sunshine, that just feels really far away when you're struggling. Like you can intellectualize it, but it's hard to believe it. And it's a little easier to let it in when you see that someone has gone through what you're going through or maybe worse.
Exactly. That's an excellent point, Ashley. I couldn't agree more. In fact, I posted just the other day, a couple of days ago, I think, on LinkedIn about this. I'm very adamant about us being able to hold all of our emotions together at once. Joy and grief, happiness and anger, frustration, whatever the case may be. There's space for all of it, and they can actually live together at the same time, and you can have them all in one day.
Yeah, sometimes in the same moment.
Right? wrote that, I feel joy for the 20 amazing years I had with my mom. In the same moment that a tear was falling down my cheek, because I still miss 30 some years later. I still miss her. But yeah, so they get to coexist. And I don't believe in toxic positivity where we just pretend everything's okay when it's not.
Yeah.
Joy is owning all of our emotions and all of who we are.
And being in relationship with people where they can accept who we are too, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's something I really like about your approach to the book and your approach to visibility is that it's not just the good parts, it's not just the perfect parts. I think that it's also like a conversation. What your publisher was talking about, like what are you going to do after the book is published, right? Sometimes it can seem like a static thing to put a book into the world because it's just a physical object that's sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
But if you do it right, you're starting a conversation, and how are you going to engage in that conversation and that community that you're creating with people who resonate with your work? Hey listeners, we've heard from a lot of women this season who are growing and scaling businesses, so we know it's not easy. If you've got a team that's growing fast or merging with another, that can feel really exciting, but then you're staring down two MarTech stacks that don't play nicely together. This is where GNW Consulting comes in. They help marketing teams sort through the mess, mapping out what to keep, what to streamline, and how to make it all actually work together. Think of them as your behind-the-scenes problem solvers, bringing strategy and then rolling up their sleeves for the execution. Plus, they're a supporter of Wednesday Women and our mission to amplify women execs. So if you're in the middle of a messy merger or it's on the horizon, head to gnwconsulting.com to learn more and see how they're helping marketing leaders move faster and smarter.
Well said. Exactly. I totally agree, because when I think about visibility, how we show up, as you know so well, gives permission for others to show up more fully. If we're doing that, if we're modeling that, then so can others. And I'll never forget this day. I was at work. It was a really rough time. We had an employee take his own life. And so with my team, we were all openly grieving. We were experiencing it and going through it together. That was with my team, my direct reports and others. But then I had to go to some other meeting with people who know nothing about what we're dealing with and what's happening. And I remember making an intentional decision in the moment. I was like, I am not going to go to this meeting, pretend everything's okay. I'm not going to go broadcast. However, if somebody asks me, I'm going to tell the truth. If somebody asked me how I was doing, and I said, I am not well. I am not well. And I explained why. I said, it is just an incredibly difficult day and moment. I'm here. You have my attention, but I do need you to understand I am not well. And I felt comfortable doing that. I didn't worry, but I wondered how people would respond. The response was nothing but care. And in fact, someone was like, do we even need to have this meeting right now? I'm like, well, I wouldn't mind if we carefully, I would like to get back to my team. So we did, let's just do a 15-minute tag up on this part. We can handle the rest later. And that's what we did. And I was so grateful that the universe gave me the courage to say the truth.
Yeah.
Because then I got to go back, with the team and continue to experience what we were experiencing in the collective. And had I just pretended everything was okay, it would have chipped away at me.
Exactly. In those moments when we speak up, we create the opportunity to get what we need, even when we don't know we need it, right? Like, I'm sure you weren't going into that meeting thinking, I'm going to tell everybody what's happened so that we can cancel this meeting, right? But when you were open with them, they gave you what you needed, even without asking, just because they heard you and they care about you. And so often when we don't speak up, we knowingly or unknowingly create resentments because we can't get what we need.
I love what you just said. Love, love, love. Because that is such an incredibly important point. And it's something I work on with my clients all the time around saying what we need. Like, it's so uncomfortable for us. I remember coming in one day after I took the dog out for their and doing a TikTok video because one of my neighbors was struggling with bags and boxes and all this stuff. She couldn't handle any of it. And I offered to help. I live in an apartment building and she lives on my floor. I offered to help and she was so uncomfortable accepting my help. I mean, fought me on it. And I'm like, if this is how we'll respond when somebody's just trying to help us carry some bags to our door, imagine when she really needs help.
Yeah.
How uncomfortable. And it broke my heart. And I told her, sorry, you're going to accept my help. Give me the bag. Give me, there's no reason why I can't help you. Give me these, And
Yeah.
she was like, yeah. But that work we particularly as women have to do to get comfortable asking for what we need or just saying, like you said, sometimes we don't know what it is, but just saying we're not in a good place, or something, whatever the thing is. And I was talking to a friend because I have 85 things going on right now. Most people. I was talking to her last week and she's like, how are you? I was like, in a state of complete overwhelm. And she said, well, what can I do? I said, I don't know. Can you got a meditation or something? Because this is all on me right now. I don't know what you could do. And then I realized I just needed to name it. Like I just needed to name it. So that willingness to be vulnerable, part of visibility, that willingness to be vulnerable is part of it. And I know it requires courage. But here's the thing for me. And the queen of all things, authenticity and joy. And if we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are not being authentic. And you have to ask yourself, how does that sit with you? How does that sit with you? Are you okay not being your true self? And if you are, then there are other reflections that are needed around the why, and what we can do, because the truth of the matter is you won't have the opportunity to fully enjoy what life has in store for you if you're not showing up authentically. And the world misses out on what you have to give.
Yeah.
So there's
so true.
the you and the them, you and the community involved in that. And so that's why that vulnerability part of the visibility journey is key.
Yeah. Well, and the story that you told about helping your neighbor, right? That's vulnerability one-on-one. And that can be hard enough to let somebody carry your bags to the door. And then we talk about publishing a book, being visible on a place like LinkedIn, taking the stage somewhere. And we need to be just as vulnerable there. I agree with so much of what you're saying, and it makes me think of all the opportunities that have been created just by me asking for help or telling people how I really felt on LinkedIn, right? And not in some performative way to try to get likes or manipulate anyone's emotions. Just feeling my feelings out loud has probably been some of the most responded to content that I've ever published. And asking for connection is the whole reason I'm talking to you right now. The opportunity to host this podcast came to me because I was just asking to be connected with great women leaders, and I got connected with Wednesday women, and it was asking for what I needed, which I think in a younger version of me would have been terrified and horrified to do, to think that I needed anything, that I couldn't just provide everything to myself, by the merit of my own intellect or whatever. And now I've seen the power of just asking the question and all the doors that it can open. And, Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. What advice do you have for women who, I think there are plenty of them who probably ask themselves the question, am I okay not being my authentic self? And the answer is no. But they've spent a long time performing to somebody's expectation of them or this idea that they've created about who they have to be in order to be a leader. How would you encourage them to get in touch with their own voice and practice that kind of vulnerability?
I love that question. I mean, first and foremost, I would say what we know, but sometimes need to be reminded of, which is you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. And let me just be clear. This is not something that we conquer and arrive and we're done and we're good on the visibility train. No, that's not how this goes. But you make considerable progress in what I'll offer is the first opportunity for us is to create stillness. Create some stillness for ourselves, whatever that looks like. If you're a busy mom and you just go spend an extra 5 minutes in the bathroom with the door closed, but find a space for some extra stillness or for some stillness where you just stop and think about what the potential cost is to not showing up fully. And what are the potential gains showing up fully? And it's this whole sort of risk management, risk assessment thing is how I think of it. And the deal is this: there are no requirements in the how you embark on this journey. I say dip your little pinky toe, just a pinky toe, in the water and start there. And do something that's real low risk. Like one of your closest colleagues at work, when they say, how are you? And you're exhausted, you tell them. Not the colleague that you worry they don't have your back and all that, but the one you're really close to and you go to lunch with or whatever. I'm exhausted and my kids are me crazy right now. Or, that's the college thing right now, college application, it's back to school, and whatever thing is. But start small where you actually know you have some safety in being open and honest. You just haven't taken advantage of it. So that's my first advice, is to start there. And secondly, spending some time reflecting on where did you show up in alignment with your values and where did you not, at home and at work. And I will be honest, a lot of folks come to me and they don't even know what their values are, and that's okay. You can just go on and Google a list of values and start doing the work of figuring out what are the things. And I say try to get to 3 to 5. That's really hard, by the way.
Yeah.
But what are the things that you absolutely will not compromise on, like honesty, integrity, family, faith, whatever that might be. And then once you settle on some, think about how those are showing up in your life. And if they're not, that's the first place you can start working. Because generally those places feel comfortable for us in terms of taking some risk. If I'm all about honesty, like for me is, that's one of them, but authenticity. I'm not compromising it for anybody or anything. Even when I have to say something that you don't want to hear, I'll find a compassionate way, but I'm going to say it. And those things usually end up feeling safe. So then you can get your whole foot in the water. Get past the toe dip, get the whole foot in and maybe a whole leg and beyond. But that's how I suggest people start, because there are, if we just take a moment to think about it, there are already safe spaces for us to do that. We just don't take advantage.
That's really excellent advice that lowers the risk of practicing that vulnerability and exploring what authenticity means to you. So I want to thank you so much for sharing that really great advice and for sharing your experience with us today. I think It was a really powerful reminder about engaging in visibility as community. I absolutely love that. I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Ashley. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the honor.
Now that we're at the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on how Tash's story might inspire your own. When is your silence creating an unmet need? And when is your silence depriving the world of you and your message?
If today's show inspired you to think of an extraordinary woman leader in your life, let her know about the Wednesday Women Executive Membership. It's a safe space for women leaders to tackle any challenge, ask questions, and uplift others. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your ratings help us grow and inspire even more people. Thank you to our Season 2 sponsor, GNW Consulting, to our executive producers, Melissa Moody and Leslie Greenwood, and to our technical producer, Yelena Georgievich, with Kind Media Productions. I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, hoping the small ripple creates a big wave in your life. Until next time.